Also, how does one actually decide on when or whether to retire early? You know, the RE part of FIRE, right? If, of course, assuming that one's already in the enviable position of being actually financially independent. Hey, I'm Zempak here. Another day not working for the man. I mean, I say that as the constant reminder of what I left behind because it makes me just feel so free. Okay, there's nothing quite comparable in life than the total ability to dictate how to spend your own time as you want. So then why aren't more people in this position, right? Normally I would have said, well, saving and investing for the long term is difficult for most people, right? At least in the Western world, because it runs counter to the knee-jerk facade of the capitalist market system. We're constantly being bombarded with images and ideas that if we don't go on and consume constantly, we'd be somehow less happy or something, okay? And that fact remains. But today's topic is kind of the opposite of that, right? What if someone's already hit the watermark for financial independence, but are having problems convincing themselves to let the work part itself go, right? I saw this question in the Facebook Fire group and thought it was relatively well put. So let's read that question first, a direct question, and I'm going to read it, right? And I quote, most of the literature and talk on this forum is about financial independence, or FI. No one talks about the other part of the concept, which is retire early, RE. My situation is that I am 57 and probably reached FI around 10 years ago, but still can't take the decision to retire early and have been looking for answers as to how one decides to retire early. I would like your views on how people motivate themselves to retire early. It's difficult to decide what is enough, right? It is difficult to give away a high-paying job, and one always wonders whether one will regret the decision. There are issues of comparison with one's peers, and of course there is the other extreme philosophical approach of Ikigai, where they suggest one should never retire and should continue working, end quote. Oh boy, I love writing clips for answers, especially to philosophical questions like this, because I feel so strongly about the topics like this one. So I'm going to address the circumstances and reservations this particular dude has and probably give a general comment on why I think most people should definitely retire early instead of waiting 10 plus years post hitting, you know, their FI number to actually get to the RE. Wow. Absurd, really, seriously. Anyway, if you're intrigued by what I might say, please subscribe, like, comment, and share, and all those social media buzzwords. Or not, or whatever, okay? Because I'm rich enough for me, and we'll be great regardless. Point number one. So first, the most obviously tricky questions to answer, and the OP has it right? And that is, what is enough, right? How does one know when to give up a high-paying and possibly high-prestige job to go from getting a bunch of money regularly from an employer to, well, not, right? I think for me the answer is simple. Enough is, of course, subjective, right? That's why there's all these sub-segments of the FIRE groups in the world, right? Like lean FIRE and fat FIRE and all those. But generally, if your investment and or net worth is generating enough income or returns to sustain yourself indefinitely, that should be enough, right? Go with the math. Or look at it another way. Would having another big chunky bonus really change your life at this point, right? This is where I gotta go with anecdotal evidence, right? I was willing to walk away from a relatively guaranteed another $1 million, okay? Because for me, just one more mil wouldn't really change my life at all, okay? All I've learned as I've gotten older is that I'm just a simple dude, okay? I don't blow money on stuff anyway. So I had enough. Even more money is just icing on the cake, right? What the amount of enough can only be determined by the individual, right? So I'd guess that if someone got to FI at 47 and then continue to work for another decade, then surely they've built up quite a bit, an additional cushion to fall back on at this point, right? Okay, point number two. He mentions the fear of regret if one takes the plunge of retiring. Ooh, this particular complaint I actually hear from my wifey all the time, right? She's still working and thinking about retiring alongside of me. This is actually one of her big stumbling blocks. I find this argument just kind of amusing because, well, FIRE isn't really a big thing in society overall, right? Most people, I would say like 90% of the people have never even heard of it. So if you decide to retire early, well before the regular retirement age, to most casual observers, do you know what that looks like? It just looks like you're quitting a job without another one lined up. I would imagine most people might actually pity or worry for you. Seriously, they don't know the idea that in this case the quitter never needs to work again. Does that make sense? But on to the regret part, right? Because early retirement is simply a personal choice, right? Why would you have any regret? Because in the very worst case scenario, if you really don't like having the freedom to do whatever you want with your time, or let's say, your math was wrong, and you feel like, you're really dipping into your reserves, there are literally zero societal blocks to prevent anyone from just, re-entering the workforce and getting another job again. Now, I get it. Maybe you can't get whatever job you last had, but there's probably a good reason for that too, right? After all, you can't have loved that job that much if you decided to leave it for any reason, right? Right? Finally, oh man, I love that this OP brought up the idea of Ikigai. I had to look it up. And actually, I agree that this is a lovely concept, right? It's basically the idea that one needs purpose in life, and the OP takes that to mean one should always work and therefore never retire. Look, there are studies in the US too that talks about how regular retirees really don't, or some of them, right? They really don't do too well right after leaving their place of work. Because that's been their routine for so long, right? Multiple decades. I get it, routine and purpose are both very important. But I do not believe one's purpose, or just some focal point, need to be dictated by somebody else, though, in the form of a corporation or a boss. That's just silly. To say that only externally dictated work can be a purpose takes all the agency out of one's own being, right? Maybe I'm just being a rebel, or most people simply love being led by the nose, first by their parents, then by society or companies, and they're no worse off, right? Oh wait, I absolutely do not believe that at all, right? Retirement never actually means sitting around and literally do nothing, right? That's just silly. People only think that because by regular retirement age, right, the vast majority of older people are no longer capable of doing much more than just, sitting on their couch and watching TV. The whole point of early retirement is to do what you actually want to do while you can actually still do it, or find a purpose or skill to hone in on for the rest of your life. Be your own master. It is as simple as that. So, in conclusion, I think the OP should have left his place of work years ago, right? Because all I heard was he's staying on for an arbitrary amount of additional money that he doesn't need, so that he could keep up with the Joneses in some weird self-perpetuating cycle of consumerism that most people are still stuck in, and hanging out to arguments about purpose as if he himself cannot actually figure out what he would like to do with time if he had more of it freely. Now, is that you, audience? I mean, I get it. It's actually a weird philosophical question to ask an adult who usually are so short on leisure time, right? If you ask them, what would you do if you had all the time in the world? Not a day or a week or a month, but all of it. What would you do? I think most people would actually have a problem coming up with that answer, right? I know my answer, but what's yours? Cheers. A la prochaine.